Hello everyone and welcome back. And before I get cracking on with today's video, I just want to say I'm hoping you're all having a fantastic summer wherever it is you are, wherever it is you're doing, whether you're watching the Euros football or the football in South America or the NBA finals, wherever it may be, or keeping yourself busy in whatever it is you might be doing. I hope you're just enjoying life right now because that's really the most important thing really right now. But today we're going to be talking about something that's quite a hot topic, and that is how Milan are dealing with the Primavera players at its disposal, and most notable is Tommaso Pobega. And I'm going to really just dive into my opinion about how we should handle Primavera players, why I feel like what Maldini is going to do if he does sell Pobega for around 15 million euros, it is a good thing for the club, and sort of to provide a different sort of context behind it, which a lot of fans seem to forget about. Before I dig into the history and the nostalgia, which will, dive me down through the players of the past who we've sold, or players who we thought were going to be, the next best things that failed to be anything really. I want to clearly say that Pobega, I think, is a nice talent, a good talent. I just don't feel like systematically he will fit in with the club. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why Maldini is considering his sale. I don't think he fits in with the 4-2-3-1. I'm sorry to say, he can't play a defensive midfielder position. He can't play attacking midfield. That's the reason why I think we're considering the sale. Also, I feel like the club, are they utilising the youth team to its potential? No, it isn't. But they're trying to work on that. I don't think the club in the past has done it to a perfect degree since probably the 80s or the 90s. And really, as you look back through time, you'll see how there's been an issue with this and not really using it and undervaluing it completely. So yeah, now it's time for the nostalgia and regret really, because a lot of people want to throw up Manuel Locatelli. They see him playing well for Sassuolo, they see him playing well for Italy at the Euros, and they're quick to forget really what the sale generated for the club. And obviously at a time where money's quite tight for the club, money's quite tight for Italian football, every penny counts. And I wish we could be like English Premier League teams where we could just throw money away and not really care about where our youth team players go or if that sale generates something for our club. But sadly we are not. We have to care about every penny that the club generates, and if it comes from a sale of a youth team player, it needs to be spent wisely. And really that's where my issue is of the past, issues with previous management. People like Mirabelli, people like Galliani. As much as I love Galliani, he undervalued the youth team and really just didn't provide us anything for the sales of certain players. And we're going to quickly peel through them now. And the first one I'm going to look at is the most recent one that we sold, who is Cutrone, he was sold to Wolves for 18 million euros. This is obviously during the Boban and Maldini era. 18 million euros for Cutrone. I guess that sale got us Rafael Leao for 25 million euros, who is still a valuable asset. He can be sold for around that figure still for 25 million euros. It's a shame he hasn't blown up at the way he has. This might be his last summer with us, so we're quick to see on that one. So I guess that's kind of a stalemate because Cutrone hasn't really gone on to exceed in his career. Next up is the player we just mentioned before, who is Manuel Locatelli. Sold to Sassuolo for 14 million euros. That sale essentially got us Bennacer for 16 million euros. And I feel like Bennacer has been a good player. He's been pretty good for the club. Now we start to look at failures of the past, and I obviously can't do this video without going through that little niche period that we had with the Chinese takeover and when Mirabelli was in charge of transfers. So the first one we're going to look at is Mattia Di Sciglio. Yes, he wasn't really good when he was sold, really. I was quite fed up with him at Milan, but he was still a Primavera player nonetheless. The sale generated 12 million euros from Juventus, and that helped us get Leonardo Bonucci in. And the little I say about Bonucci, the better. He just was a complete bust with the club, left within a year. It's just, there's a lot of wrong things about this. And also another one which is also quite brought up recently is Matteo Pessina. And Pessina was sold to Atalanta for 1.7 million euros, and that helped in bring Andrea Conti. I want to quickly say that I guess at the time, as Milan fans, especially myself, seeing all these players come in, getting myself hyped up with us potentially challenging for the title, it was no-brainers. Di Sciglio was on the decline. Pessina, no one sort of knew what he could be, what his potential was. Obviously he's exploded now because he's getting that opportunity now with Atalanta. yeah, I don't really like Mirabelli for bringing in Bonucci and obviously how that turned out. Conti, it's a hard one. I guess injuries completely just riddled his tenure at the club. He's still with us right now, also, by the way. Andrea Conti's not left us yet, so but I feel like he's set to depart us this summer. But yeah, we essentially, Pessina, yeah, there's a bit of regret there, but we still have that 50%, selling on fee, so we might be able to get him back. So not all is lost for that one. So now it's Galliani time, and sometimes he's gotten this right. Sometimes he's generated a decent sale for a player and gotten a good player in exchange back with that money generated. Sometimes he hasn't. I guess you can't always get them right. I guess that's sort of importance about this video. You can't always get every sale you generate for a then potential transfer right. First player we're going to look at is Simone Verdi. He was sold to Bologna for 6.4 million euros. Essentially, that sale got us someone like Jose Sousa or Lapadula, which was, that wasn't a really good pickup after that one. After that, which was a player I was quite sad to see go, who is Brian Cristante to Benfica for 5.2 million euros. And at the time, I thought that was pretty pathetic price tag to get for a player who had so much potential, was showing a lot of prospect. But the sale got us Giacomo Bonaventura for 5.3 million euros, who was fantastic, I thought, for the club. But Galliani did get lucky there because he was about to sign Jonathan Biabiani, and luckily that sale, that purchase didn't go through, and we ended up going for Bonaventura on the last day of the window. After that, before that is Rodney Strasser. He was sold to Genoa for 3.5 million euros. I guess his sale generated us bringing in Walter Bielsa for 3 million euros from Genoa. Bielsa, not a great player there. I guess this is like peak banter era for the club, so we're really just exchanging youth team players for, players, just hit and hope players, really just throwing anything against the wall to see what sticks. Alberto Palosci was sold to Chievo Verona for 6.5 million euros. He was doing quite well there, but essentially that was the FFP season where UEFA just basically kicked us right up the arse, and we had to generate any sort of income to make our books look good. So essentially no replacement came in for Palosci's departure. Before that, Alexander Merkel, he was sold to Genoa for 6.5 million euros, and despite him looking pretty good the season before in Milan's, league-winning campaign, that sale managed to allow us to buy Kevin Prince Boateng for 10.5 million euros, and obviously there's that link with Genoa there. But yeah, Boateng coming into the club, it was a no-brainer. He had a fantastic first season with us. I think there was like a loan deal, so we bought him at the end of that summer when we won the league. So I guess it's sort of hot and cold here, really, with Galliani and his sales and who he brings into the club. And I guess before that, we can look at players like Matteo Darmian, who was sold to Palermo for 1.3 million euros, currently playing for Inter Milan and just won the league title with them. So I guess, you can't really predict a player's future in football, really. I guess that's down to him. That's down to him to work hard. He was sold very cheap to another Serie A team and obviously worked his way through the ranks. And, good luck to any player that does that. So yeah, those player sales generated some form of income for the club, I guess, which is better than nothing. And I think that's the way we have to look at it. Sometimes players just don't generate any form of income for the club, if they come from the Primavera or the youth rank, as you want to call it. Sometimes they just dwindle into nothing, and the career is just bouncing in between Serie B, Serie C, some Serie A clubs, and go on a free contract at the end of their Milan contract. And it's a shame. It's a shame. A lot of names as well off this list I had high hopes for, but it just doesn't work out that way. Some of these names include Felicioli, Zigoni, Oduamadi, Petagna, Zanellato, Vido, Domenica Dia, Albertazzi, Rodrigo Eli, Fossati, and Davide Di Gennaro. And I guess if there's one name from that list I can say that probably has done something with his career, it would be Petagna. I think he's at Napoli right now, bounced in between a few Serie A clubs, Spal, Atalanta. He looked okay, but once again, he's just not really led to nothing in his career. And not to nothing, that's a bit harsh, but not to something of any note, not to how we're comparing him to players like Locatelli or Cristante, or even, Pessina, of how he's doing right now. So, it doesn't always work out for these youth team players, and I think that's something you need to remember when it comes to the sale of Pobega. Maybe he might explode at Atalanta, maybe he won't, if he eventually goes there. Quickly going back a little bit further into the sort of the 2000s decade, we didn't really do much with that, with the Primavera back then either. It wasn't anything to sort of scream home about. chances weren't really given. I guess the squad was at such a high quality, it didn't allow for those chances to be generated for any player coming from the youth ranks. When I look back, really, the only players that were playing in that team that were playing from the Milan Primavera, which was Ignacio Abate, Luca Antonini, Marco Borriello, and obviously Christian Brocchi was in that squad as well. And a lot of people forget about this, that Ambrosini and Gattuso weren't from the youth team. They came from other teams' youth teams, but obviously were brought quite at an early age from Milan into their senior career. But Brocchi was the only one actually coming from that crop in the mid 2000s era, the start of the 2000s. But yeah, going a little bit in between that period, yeah, Antonini came into the squad because Maldini retired, and Taiwo was no good. Ignacio Abate, he came in because Massimo Oddo had retired and Zambrotta was on the decline as well. He was in his sort of late 30s era. Marco Borriello came into the club because we needed a striker. Essentially, players were bought back, well, ex-Primavera players who had gone on to other Serie A clubs were brought back into the squad because we needed holes to fill. There were reasons for them to come back. And another thing we have to think about with Pobega is there is no role for him at the club. I'm sorry to say it, but he does not play in a position that he can currently fill to the best of his abilities. Those players were brought back, they did. That's the difference. So really, as a summary to all this, I just want to say that the youth sector is just as important as it was back in the 80s, back in the 90s, back in the 70s, whatever you want to call it. Back when we were generating players like Maldini, Baresi, Costacurta, Albertini. It's just as important. But the difference is these days there's a lot more money generated through football. There's a lot more money in the sport, especially for young players. There's a lot of money to be made from young players because they're seen as a younger asset and, they've got a longer career ahead of them. There's a lot of money in the sport. And in with these days with the pressures of FFP and making capital gain on a certain player, it's the easiest way to generate money and generate a profit. And it looks fantastic for your books. Don't get me wrong. If there's one guy who knows the importance of the youth sector, it's Paolo Maldini. He's the guy. Obviously, he's been and done it. He's the living proof that you can play for one club your whole career, and the club that you worked your way up through the youth ranks for. Of course, he's got the family history, but nonetheless, he knows the importance of youth team players and having players that have heart to play for the shirt. But perhaps there's more at play here. Perhaps Pobega wants what's best for his career. Perhaps he doesn't want to just come back and be, fifth or fourth choice as a centre midfielder in a position that he doesn't feel like he's comfortable with. Perhaps he knows the situation at hand. Perhaps Maldini knows it as well. He's seen enough players in the past, and he wouldn't just sell a player of high potential for a quick buck just because, we want to generate a little bit of money like previous management has done. He's probably going to make that sale because it's the most logical decision for us and the club, and also improve the squad quality at the same time. And that's the key part, really. That's the major part about all of this, really. If we generate any sale or any income for the club, it has to be used wisely. And that doesn't just stop with Pobega. If we sell an asset like, Jens Petter or Haug, as much as I don't really want to see him go because I feel like he can get better, he just needs a bit more time. At the same time, if we make a nice profit on that, I hope that money goes into making the squad overall better, because I've always believed in the philosophy of 2 players for every position, and any players who are access to requirements, the third in the pecking order, like Hauger would be, like Pobega would be, I'd rather that sale go through and then we can have a better rotational piece into the squad, because we clearly lack strength in depth, strength in quality as well. So, there's obviously a bigger goal here at play. And I've said it before in the video, I love Pobega. I think, I hope he does fantastic with his career, regardless if it's with us or with another club, because you can't help but want the best for any player who's come through our youth ranks. I just want to back management here. I know I always do it quite a lot. We get a lot of slack for it on this channel, that we are always behind management and the decisions and Elliot. But they can't really do anything right in this decision. If they keep Pobega and they were to look to sell a player like Krunic or sell a player like Castillejo, which is a very hard sell, by the way, and wouldn't generate us a lot of money, you then complain that you ain't getting good players coming into the squad. But when in a scenario that they're selling a player like Pobega, getting a nice capital gain for it, hopefully 50 million euros, they could get a decent player for that, or add that to the pot money to get a good player into the squad. Essentially, that could get us, that 15 million euros could get us a player like Sabitzer into the squad to handle his transfer fee. And then would you complain about that? And I think that's the context you have to look at it. Don't look at what the sale means right now. Look at what it will mean at the end of the transfer window. And you might hold me to that one. And if you do, then in fair play. If we don't buy any players for this money that is sales generated, then I'll put my hands up and say that maybe that was the wrong decision. But we can only live in the moment, and I can only live with the logical decision of selling a player to get another good player in. So let's hopefully Maldini gets it right this summer. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Pobega and his potential sale. So guys, we're going to wrap things up here today. I hope you're all doing fantastic, and Forza Milan.